Hello, it's Lynn Watts here, and today's topic for this video is a book that I think is really important for you to read if you work with children of any age. Most particularly, though, if you're raising or working with children who are middle school or high school. And of course, that's not my area of expertise. I was an elementary school counselor for 20 years. So my expertise is younger children, but I think this is an important book regardless of what age you're working with kids. And this book is called The Anxious Generation. The Anxious Generation, you can see right here, it's written by Jonathan Haidt. I'm not sure how to say that, Haidt. He's a social psychologist, and the subtitle is How the Great Rewiring of Childhood is Causing an Epidemic of Mental Illness. So I think we all know from reports of all kinds that children are more anxious and more depressed than at any time in history, or at least in any time that has been recorded, where studies have been made and that sort of thing. And this book makes a suggestion, I guess, a very strong suggestion, that the reason for much of that has to do with the internet and in particular social media. So when he says the great rewiring of childhood, what he's talking about is children's access in particular to any type of social media before they are mentally, emotionally, socially, in any way prepared for the kind of interactions that are possible on social media. And I think you would agree that many of us as adults have trouble with the emotional, social, mental, so forth aspects of social media. In fact, I can't tell you how many of my friends have said to me, I'm off, I'm out. It's too much. It's too, it's too volatile. It's too hateful, all kinds of issues with social media. So if adults have trouble handling it, imagine children. And so it's up to our job, up to us as adults in children's lives to monitor that, perhaps to restrict that. But he makes a very important case for this. I will say he is not saying that we should do away with social media. He's not saying we should do away with iPhones or any kind of phones where kids can access social media, but he is saying that it should be restricted in the sense that children should not have access until they are mature enough to handle it. So I don't want to try and summarize the whole book because it's really goes into a lot of depth and has a lot of studies in it there that are very interesting. I'm just going to tell you a few of the main chapter headings. The first one that I think is really important is what children need to do in childhood. And so he makes a case for the fact that children are way too much on the internet of any kind, and perhaps I should just say computers in terms of video games or anything, and that impedes their socialization. So childhood has kind of been replaced in many ways with this kind of interaction with a screen rather than interaction with children. Another topic of a chapter is the need for risky play, that many times as adults, we've become so overprotective of children that they don't experience risk as young children when the risks are much lower, and then become perhaps more risky when there's no supervision, teenage years or older, or they avoid risk altogether. And what does that mean for their lives? So you could go into that. Puberty and the blocked transition to adulthood. And then he talks about 4 foundational harms: social deprivation, sleep deprivation, which is certainly the case. You can spend all 24 hours on a screen. Attention fragmentation, our inability to focus, and addiction, the problem of addiction too. And how many of us as adults have felt addicted to scrolling through various social media? There is a chapter on social media and how it harms girls. And then on the other hand, what is the attraction for boys and how it can harm boys? And then he makes some recommendations for collective action in terms of what governments and tech companies can do, what schools can do, what parents can do. So there's something for everyone in this book. And I think it's definitely worth reading, or if you're not someone who feels like you're going to really make it through a book of this kind, it's very readable, but nevertheless, we're not all great readers, then I would recommend that you look at some of the podcasts where the author has been interviewed and learn about what he has in the book. One in particular is Dr. Becky Kennedy, a clinical psychologist who has all kinds of good information about parenting with young children. She interviews Jonathan Haidt about the book, and then you could also listen to the Huberman podcast, which is much more research science based. He's a professor out of Stanford. He interviews all kinds of different people, and he does interview Jonathan Haidt. You can get some good information from that as well. So great recommendation. The book came out last year, and if you have not read it or at least learned about his philosophy and recommendations here, and you're someone who in any way interfaces with young children, I highly recommend the book. So again, hope that helps, and thanks so much for listening.